Hey everybody, I'm Zelda Master, and today I'm going to be doing something I didn't imagine myself doing, and that is a Zelda tier list. For those who don't know, lately there's been this trend of tier lists. I believe iDubbbz, which is also a YouTuber, created this idea with a fast food tier list, and everyone's kind of been making their own tier lists. I had a lot of people suggest for me to make a tier list on the Legend of Zelda games, and I thought that'd be pretty fun. I'm not one to follow trends, but this idea seems really cool and incorporates the Legend of Zelda, so yeah, might as well. And I've never done like a Zelda top 5 or top 10, so this is the best way to kind of showcase what my favorite Zelda games are. But don't worry, I want to make a more in-depth top 5 or top 10 or top 20. There aren't necessarily 20 games, but I want to make a list of all my favorite Zelda games one day. The plan was eventually when I'll beat them all, but I'm like 2 or 3 games away from finishing every Zelda game as 100% Let's Play. So hopefully one day we'll get to that and I'll have, you know, in-depth review top 5 or 10s or countdowns of the series. But anyways, let's just do this meme tier list thing. Thought it'd be cool, you know, just kind of try this trend. It's not something I normally would consider, but I want to try it out for The Legend of Zelda, and that way I can let you guys know what my favorite Zelda games are and where they stand. And yeah, so let's go and get started. Now, I'm not going to be doing any spin-off games. I'm going to be doing every single Zelda game that was officially released by Nintendo, and that is an actual Legend of Zelda game, not like Hyrule Warriors or any game similar to that, or the CDI games. Don't expect those on the list. But yeah, and the way I'm gonna kind of rank them is in chronological order in release date instead of timeline. So we're gonna start from Zelda 1 and end off with Breath of the Wild and kind of see where we go from there. So let's start off with Zelda 1. Now I have Photoshop open because I noticed everyone who does these tier lists kind of just download a template and then throws the, you know, logo or whatever they're talking about onto which category of the list it is on, and I'm gonna kind of do the same thing, but hopefully I'll edit it well afterwards and it will look much better. But for now, just to kind of pinpoint which you know, game is in which slot, I'm just gonna kind of use Photoshop. So you can see me clicking around. If you hear any mouse clicks, just ignore it. But alright, let's start off with the very first Zelda game that was ever released, The Legend of Zelda. Zelda 1, as people like to call it, or Zelda NES. For me, I'll be honest, even though it's the first Zelda game and without it, Zelda wouldn't be what it is. It's like what the first game that had saving, you know, and it was super unique in that regard because it was a game that you don't just try to get a high score for. It's a game that you work towards, and you had progression and story, and it was just amazing back then. But I wasn't born back when the game first came out. My first game was like Ocarina of Time, so that game just seems so outdated. I don't have that nostalgic love that, you know, older fans do. And I'll be real, I just feel like the game doesn't hold up. So in my opinion, Zelda 1 is like a D. Yeah, even though it's not horrible for its time, it just does not hold up. And I hate to kind of start off the list with something so negative, but yeah, that's just my opinion, and that's why I'm making this list. I'm sure everyone has their own opinions, but in my opinion, I don't really like Zelda 1. But moving on to Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, also on the NES. It came out right after. I don't know if Nintendo knew what direction they were going for. They went from a top-down adventure-like Zelda game to a 2D side-scroller, open-world exploration Zelda game that was really different and just too much for its time. They could not do everything they wanted to do. The game seemed really limited, and in my opinion, Zelda 2 gets an F. Like, I don't care. It's worse than Zelda 1. It's probably the worst. It's gonna be the worst on the list, I can assure you that. I'm just not a fan at all of The Adventures of Link. It was just a game that kind of flopped in my opinion, and I would love to see Nintendo remake it and kind of give us the vision they originally wanted with that game. So don't get me wrong, both Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 would be awesome if they were reimagined. I just feel like today, if you try to play them as a standard game, they just don't hold up for what they are. But yeah, that's just my opinion. But moving on to, in my opinion, the first Zelda game that did it right was A Link to the Past, and this is one too many that is like their favorite Zelda game. It's such a good game. It does everything right. It's kind of what created the Zelda formula with, you know, 3 temples leading to the Master Sword, and then the 6 or so temples to the final boss, and just kind of how the temples are split up and everything. The structure is what created Zelda, and it's a huge thing within the series, and it's something that is just so nostalgic. The music, everything about this game, I feel like it was the first Zelda game that actually feels like a Zelda game. So yeah, straight up, A Link to the Past gets an A. Easy. It's such a good game. It's probably one of the best, but in my opinion, it's not the best, or it doesn't deserve an S. But I'm sure a lot of other people might think otherwise. But yeah, Link to the Past is such a good game, and the follow-up to it is even better in my opinion. But we're not there yet. We're still moving on in the timeline, so I'll get to that later on. Or not the timeline, but the release date. The timeline would have started off with Skyward Sword, and these games would have been at the very end of one of the timeline splits. So yeah, we're kind of going backwards in terms of timeline. But speaking of timeline, the timeline that splits them into 3 is Ocarina of Time, my very first Zelda game, the game I took the most seriously when it first came out, because that's kind of like the game that was released when I was getting into video games. I was really young, about 4 or 5. I just remember playing the crap out of it. I get so nostalgic. I feel like that game took what A Link to the Past did and then added to that formula and kind of really made Zelda what it is, especially because it's a 3D exploration game. Don't get me wrong, top-down is fun as well, and I feel like, if you prefer the top-down, you'll like A Link to the Past more, but if you prefer the 3D, style of exploration, you'd love Ocarina of Time more. And in my opinion, I prefer the 3D style, and Ocarina of Time is just so amazing that I have to give it straight up an S rank. It is like one of the best video games. It was the king of video games. I believe it had like the best reviews for the longest time, like out of all video games. I think Breath of the Wild almost followed it up, but I still think Ocarina of Time is like the king of video games and the king of reviews, and I completely agree with that. To me, it is the standard of what a video game is. When I think of a classic game, I think of the N64, OOT, just playing that game. Yeah, it's so good. So yeah, OOT, easy S tier, no crap. Following OOT, a game that came right after it was Majora's Mask, and it didn't take too long. It was like 1 or 2 years in development. Nintendo retook all the assets of Ocarina of Time and then made a more in-depth kind of story thing that was just much darker and different, and it was so good. Honestly, I prefer Majora's Mask over Ocarina of Time, but I don't believe I would have liked Majora's Mask if I didn't play Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is just the game that made Majora's Mask what it is, and I don't think you'd enjoy Majora's Mask as much if you didn't play Ocarina prior to it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to give Majora's Mask also an S rank. Don't worry, there won't be 2 games that get S ranks, but those 2 are just too nostalgic, too good for what they were. And if Nintendo could recreate anything like Majora's Mask or OT again, it would be so amazing. So definitely, in my opinion, those are like one of the best Zelda games, and if I were to recommend Zelda to anyone, I'd definitely say play those 2, especially on the 3DS because they were remade, so I'm really glad they did that. But moving on to more portable games. Now, these were all for home consoles. All of these Zelda games I just mentioned later ported into handheld consoles and stuff, but the Zelda games I'm moving on to are now going to be portable because the Game Boy had came out, Game Boy Color, and Nintendo was trying to release games on those hardware, and I'll be real, the limitations show. Like, those games aren't really as good as they could have been, but I feel like they had a lot of potential. And yeah, we'll start off with Ages and Seasons. So Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons were kind of like a two-way game. It kind of reminds me of like Red and Blue with Pokemon. You want to get both, and if you actually beat one, you get like a secret password to put into your file to be able to play the second game, which if you played Ages first, you'd be able to play Seasons after and have your file transfer. And it was really unique because it gave you additional things. So like, it rewarded you for beating the game, and what made it really cool is the password you put in to your other file, it would write your name that you had on your previous file. And essentially what it was is, I believe the game just gave you a code that seemed like a password that would have the game write out your name, so it seemed like it transferred. Because as a kid, I didn't get it. I'm like, whoa, did my file transfer from one cartridge to another? But no, it was a really clever idea that kind of forced the player to play both, and it had a really good story to it, but they were just really short and simple, and kind of just limited for what they were, but definitely worth playing. So I have to give both Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons a C. I wouldn't say it's like as bad as Zelda 1. I think they're way better. They have way more to it. They're not as limited, and overall there's a lot of potential with it. Like, you really feel like there's a story, but it just doesn't really hold up today, and overall I feel like they could have been better, but that's just my opinion. Anyways, moving on from there, I'm gonna do Four Swords. Four Swords kind of came out at the blue. I feel like it came out during Wind Waker when it came out, or before. If it came out before, then I don't remember, because I remember when the GameCube first came out, my mom had purchased it with Wind Waker. It was like a bundle set, and it came with like the demo of OOT or something. It came with like a bunch of stuff. It was really cool for what it was. But Four Swords is a game I just never got into, especially the one on GBA. And rating the one on the GBA, I would say that deserves like a F. It's probably just as bad as The Adventure of Link. And the reason why I say that is because, one thing, it's impossible to play without friends. You need a cable link to play it. I know they re-released it for the 3DS, a part of the Ambassador program. I thought that was really cool. It gave people a second chance to play it, but the game just didn't deliver. It's a cool idea of Zelda multiplayer, but trying to play the original Four Swords, not so fun. However, Four Swords Adventures, it gets better, but I'm not there yet. So we're moving on to Wind Waker now, which came out, I want to say, after Four Swords. I'm trying to do it in the actual order, but I might be wrong with those two release dates. Regardless, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, I honestly hated it at first when the game first came out. I did not like the graphics for what they were, but as time went on, I slowly, realized that the game is more than just its graphics, and overall, it got, it kind of grew on me. Like, I really like the way the toon style looks now, but at first I'm like, I want realistic stuff. Like, I came off of Majora's Mask, such a real dark Zelda game. To get Wind Waker, it was so weird, but Wind Waker has its dark and serious moments. Like I said, you just gotta give it a chance. I'd say Wind Waker, for what it is, and like the open world exploring and how they do it, it's so much different than any other Zelda game, because the entire game is a giant, vast ocean, and when you get past, let's say, 1/3 of the game, you can finally explore everything, and it really feels like you're in the open sea. I'll be real, the game is really slow at first when you can't actually explore the whole sea, so it slows it down a bit, but it opens up, and it's so good for what it is, and adds so many new things, from like the Korok Leaf, or the Deku Leaf rather, which you can like glide. I remember that's like the first Zelda game where you can travel in air, and I feel like that was implemented so much better in Breath of the Wild. So like Wind Waker was the first version of that, you could say, because the Deku Leaf reminded me so much of the paraglider that we now have in Breath of the Wild. But yeah, so Wind Waker, I would say, is like a solid, B. I wouldn't say it's an A. It's not like the best or one of the best, but it's really good, and I definitely recommend people playing it. But I feel like people who aren't into, traveling in the sea and that open ocean and all of that, they might get a bit bored, because there's a lot of blue in this game. So B for blue. That's why I gave it that. Okay, whatever. Anyways, moving on. Let's go to Four Swords Adventures. Now, I called out Four Swords the original because it's hard to play, and overall it was kind of limited for being on a GBA, but Four Swords Adventures does it so much better. You can play the game single player, which is good. If you don't have friends, the game is still playable. And on top of that, just the story, the gameplay, everything, it just really works well on a GameCube, and I had so much fun playing it, with or without friends. I have to give it, a B along with Wind Waker. I think it's really good. I would love to see Nintendo make more multiplayer Zelda games like it, but yeah, I'm just gonna go with the B, because I can't necessarily see it being better than the Wind Waker, but it's not worse. Wind Waker and Four Swords Adventures, you can have a whole lot of fun with. So that's just my opinion. I know a lot of Wind Waker fans are going to be upset, because some people consider Wind Waker S tier, but that's not me. Anywho, moving on, we're going to move on to the Minish Cap. Now, this was a GBA game, but I feel like it was not limited for what it was. Yeah, it was on the handheld, but Capcom went in with this game. It is so good. I feel like everything they wanted to add within this game has been added. The game is huge. It even has like a little post game where you can get the mirror shield. I thought that was really cool. A lot of aesthetics from the Wind Waker. Pretty much Capcom took the new style Nintendo did with the Wind Waker and then made their own Minish Cap you know, a style with the, you know, pixelated graphics because it was on the GBA. It wasn't rendered in 3D or anything. Overall, I thought it was really cool. Ezlo is an amazing companion. So many things are good about this game that, you know, I'd have to also give it a B. I wouldn't say, again, it's better than the Wind Waker, but I'd say it's just as fun, or you can have so much fun with it. So, yeah, a lot of B rankings, but that's just because, you know, I love them, but I don't absolutely love them, and I don't hate them, of course. But moving on to something I absolutely love that's gonna get a high ranking is Twilight Princess. Yes, Twilight Princess is such a good game. It was pretty much my favorite game before Breath of the Wild. It took what Ocarina of Time had, the whole 3 dungeons leading to the Master Sword, leading to all the big temples, items, progression, that whole Zelda formula that Link to the Past pretty much started. And it kind of adds a darker twist with the whole Twilight, with you know, Wolf Link, all of that, just the aesthetic, the way the game looked, everything about it was just so dark and interesting and gritty that I feel like, you know, it was just unique and different, and I loved it for being that, and that's why I have to say Twilight Princess is an easy S rank. I guess I love Zelda so much that the S rank won't have like 1 or 2, it's gonna have multiple, because if I love the game a lot, then yeah, it's like, it's up there, but I wouldn't say it's an A, it's straight up S with OOT and Majora's Mask. I love all 3 so much, so definitely up there. But moving on, after Twilight Princess, we kind of go back to handheld, and we get a more toonish game, actually a direct sequel to the Wind Waker, and this is Phantom Hourglass. Now, Phantom Hourglass, this is gonna upset a lot of people. I already know it. This is like, a lot of people are not gonna like my opinion about it, because I know a lot of people hate Phantom Hourglass. But in my opinion, I actually like Phantom Hourglass more than the Wind Waker. Now, the reason why is just because I feel like it took what the Wind Waker wanted to do with the whole open world mechanic and kind of simplified it and made it into kind of like a, in my opinion, it's like a travel Zelda game. Like, this and Spirit Tracks are their own genre. I feel like Zelda hasn't had games like this, and I actually want more like this, where traveling is a huge component and it's its own type of gameplay, but then exploring the world is its own gameplay. Now, these games got a lot of flack for the stylus and whatnot, and I can understand people not being a fan, but I feel like if you truly gave the game a chance, you can move past it, and that would not be an issue whatsoever. So, to each their own, but personally, Phantom Hourglass, I had so much fun. I beat the game multiple times. I loved Ciela, the companion, the collectibles, upgrading your sword, having different things to it. There's just so many good things about this game that, yeah, it's an easy A for me. It's up there with A Link to the Past, and I honestly could play it more than I played the Wind Waker, so yeah, that's me though. But moving on, Spirit Tracks, which is another direct sequel for Phantom Hourglass, 100 years after, where Link and Zelda kind of establish a new Hyrule, a new kingdom. This is good, but in my opinion, it's not as good as Phantom Hourglass, or even as good as Spirit Tracks, just because, or my bad, it is Spirit Tracks, or as good as the Wind Waker, because I feel like the travel mechanic just kind of became way slower. Don't get me wrong, I love it. I love the train. I love exploring Hyrule on ground and being able to travel, you know, using my horn, just all of that. It's really unique and fun, but the issue is fast travel is a huge problem. You know, travel, there's a lot of just like weird mechanics that I feel like they didn't test a lot and didn't really think about, because like the Phantom Hourglass, I feel like they, you know, thought about everything when it comes to traveling the open world and all of that. But like Spirit Tracks, I feel like there's a lot of things missing, and there was just a lot of issues with it. So as much as I loved it, and as much as I want another sequel to this game, maybe instead of we got sea, we got land, let's get an open air Zelda game where Link travels in a hot air balloon. That would be amazing. I would love that to be the sequel to these handheld travel-like Zelda games. But yeah, sadly with how Spirit Tracks was structured, I would say it deserves a C with the Oracle games, Oracle games, you know, Seasons and Ages. It's fun for what it is, but definitely lacks compared to its predecessor. But moving on now, we're kind of at the last few Zelda games, the more controversial ones, I want to say, at least in my opinion, and the first one would be Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword, when it came out, it was known as, I believe, just Zelda Wii, or just whatever they called it. Like, it was super vague at first, and there was so much speculation for what this could be. And then when Nintendo announced that this was going to be the first Zelda game in the timeline, I got so excited, and I didn't care that there were motion controls. I didn't care that the graphics looked the way they were. I thought it was amazing, and when the game came out, I enjoyed it. Granted, the game has a lot of flaws to it, but it's still worth playing, and has probably one of the best stories in all of Zelda, at least best well told, even though that might be the main focus, and it kind of lacks in exploration because the story is just so important to Nintendo, which makes sense. It's the first Zelda game within the series, so you can't give them flack for that. But yeah, I honestly enjoyed Skyward Sword a lot. Probably one of my favorite Zelda games, even though it is hated. I don't really care that it has its issues with motion controls. I don't really care that it is linear. I think for an experience, for a full-on game, for the 20 hours you get, 20 to 30 hours first time playing the game, you will enjoy the crap out of it. And yeah, as long as you can get past the motion controls. You get past that, just like with Phantom Hourglass, you get past the stylus touch controls, then you'll enjoy it. And in my opinion, just like Phantom Hourglass, Skyward Sword deserves an A ranking. I think it's better than Wind Waker and, you know, Four Swords, Adventures, Minish Cap. In my opinion, I freaking love Skyward Sword for what it is. So yeah, it's definitely worth A. But moving on from there, we have A Link Between Worlds. Now, Link Between Worlds is, in actually Japan, it's known as pretty much A Link to the Past 2, because it is a direct sequel from it. It's in the same world, it follows the same style. I believe in Japanese, A Link to the Past is known as Triforce of the Gods, so A Link Between Worlds would be Triforce of the Gods 2. I think if they called A Link Between Worlds A Link to the Past 2 in America, it would have sold better and been more, you know, hyped for. I think what they did in Japanese was genius, because being a fan of A Link to the Past, you would have desperately wanted to play A Link Between Worlds. Some people don't know that there is such a connection between both games, and that if you were a fan of the you know, first traditional Zelda game, that you're going to get a newer, more fun experience. And in my opinion, A Link Between Worlds is such a good game. It has a great plot twist at the end. It has amazing story. It kind of adds an open world feel to what you know, Link to the Past had, but you know, with being able to go between Lorule and Hyrule, having Link turn into a painting, all of these new mechanics that they added within the game, in my opinion, it's better than A Link to the Past, and that's why I believe it should be up there with TP, OOT, and Twilight Princess as an S tier. I know a lot of people might disagree, and you know, I might actually move it down to A, because I don't want to have everything be an S tier. So let's say it's just as good as A Link to the Past, to each their own. But yeah, I'm pretty much making up this list on the spot as I go on, so I'll put it there with Skyward Sword, Phantom Hourglass, and A Link to the Past. But yeah, in my opinion, A Link Between Worlds is better than those, but it's not so much better. I'd say it's just up there with them. But moving on to a game that deserves an S is Triforce. No, I'm kidding. Triforce Heroes does not deserve an S. But it doesn't deserve an F either. I think the costumes and like the whole, you know, new kingdom, with it being all about style and the style princess and just kind of that lighthearted concept, was interesting, and the fact that they made it multiplayer. But Nintendo sucks with online games, and they could not really make this game translate well as an online game, and that's why, in my opinion, it suffers a lot, and it had so much potential, kind of similar to what Four Swords could have been as well, but it's not as bad as Four Swords. I'd say that Triforce Heroes deserves a D along with Zelda 1, because the game has potential, but it lacks so much. Okay, I don't know where my camera cut, but you know, I was just pretty much hating on Triforce Heroes essentially, but yeah, my camera just randomly decided to cut. But anyways, as I was saying, yeah, Triforce Heroes had a lot of issues. It had potential for what it was, online Zelda game with outfits and just, you know, lighthearted concept, but like I said, the reliance on online and the fact that playing single player was just really bad in my opinion, and kind of wasn't fun at all. Like the fact that you had to, you know, pick up your doppelgangers and, you know, switch between them, and it just slowed down the gameplay. It made it very slow and not fun at all to play by yourself. So yeah, in my opinion, it just deserves a D. Better than Four Swords, because it's still playable alone, but not playable enough as Four Swords Adventures was. So I would love a Four Swords Adventures like Zelda game for another Zelda multiplayer. I mean, they can take inspiration from Triforce Heroes with the outfits and everything, but if they make it, I just wish they would make it more playable as a single player game, because most people play Zelda single player. That's what Zelda's known for. Not everyone wants to share you know, their experience with someone, especially when the game requires online, or just, you know, it's not like on a home console where you can have more than one person play. You need a second cartridge and a second 3DS to make it multiplayer, or yeah, literally. So that's just my opinion. That's why, in my opinion, yeah, it deserves a D. But now, moving on to the final game, the game that was released you know, not too long ago, Breath of the Wild. I feel like, to no surprise, we already know what the answer is. This is an easy S ranking. The best, #1 of all S ranking games, you know, from OOT, Majora's Mask, and TP. I'd say Breath of the Wild is my favorite out of those 4. Obviously, Breath of the Wild has immediately become my favorite game after it was released, and I feel like it will stay that way until Nintendo somehow tops it. In my opinion, Breath of the Wild just delivered so much on pretty much everything. Like, what Ocarina of Time did, innovating what A Link to the Past was, making it 3D, Breath of the Wild did that 10 times more from all the previous Zelda games. It took what Zelda was known for exploration and, you know, beautiful scenery, and just kind of, you know, really immersing yourself in a game, and did it way better than any game has ever done it before. I still think till today Breath of the Wild has the best map, but obviously that's me being biased, because Zelda's my favorite, Hyrule would be my favorite kind of aesthetic. But yeah, just overall, Breath of the Wild, from its gameplay, from the amount they were able to put into that game, like, it's just so technically impressive, and actually such a good game that truly it is the S ranking of Zelda. It is the best Zelda game, in my opinion, and I would love for Nintendo to do what they did with Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask and make, you know, a somewhat similar game to what Breath of the Wild was, but add even more on it, because the engine is already established. What they did with Majora's Mask, I prefer more than OOT, but I feel like you need OOT to enjoy what Majora's Mask was. So I feel like if we got some sort of Breath of the Wild 2 that kind of took everything Breath of the Wild did well and add a little more on top of it, they can make something so much better. So I can only imagine, you know, Zelda getting even better as time goes on. And yeah, Breath of the Wild, for it being the most recent game in this franchise, it definitely deserves a S rank. So I'm really excited for the future of the series altogether, because you know, the newest Zelda game is the best. You don't really hear that with many games. Usually companies flop as time goes on, but you know, this is an easy S, and yeah, I'll stop praising it because I feel like I've praised it enough. Alright, so it comes out, and I don't know how I completely forgot this while recording, but I didn't mention Link's Awakening, and that was one of the first handheld, if not the first handheld Zelda game, and it was really good for its time. It reminds me a lot of the Oracle games, as they had a very similar engine, and it was originally for the Game Boy, later re-released as Link's Awakening DX for the Game Boy Color, and had the Color Dungeon, which I thought was really interesting. But we're also getting a new remake for it, and that is for the Switch, so I don't feel bad mentioning it at the very last, as we're gonna get a, you know, reimagining of this game, and, you know, maybe it will be different than the original. So yeah, I'd have to give currently the Link's Awakening that we've played, the one that came way back in the 1990s, a C, along with the Oracle games, as the game is very similar. But maybe when the new Link's Awakening comes out later this year, it will be higher on the list. But yeah, I thought I'd mention this quick because somehow I forgot to mention it. But let's finish up the video. But anyways, I feel like I clapped a lot too. I should kind of chill with that. But that about does it for this video. Took me a while, but I thought I would make it kind of, you know, a simple, laid back, me just kind of sitting down, giving you my opinions off the cuff. I didn't plan this or anything. Literally, I just been requested by a good amount of you guys that I was like, you know what, let me just consider doing this. I never really did anything like this. I always get people who asking me to rank my favorite Zelda games, so I feel like this is a great way to do it, and a great, you know, video to hold you guys off until I make a better countdown video. So yeah, don't worry, eventually I'll make a much more in-depth countdown of pretty much every Zelda game, you know, really reviewing it, giving you guys my actual opinion, showing off gameplay, showing off much more than just kind of my initial thoughts of each game. So yeah, I hope you guys are excited for that, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this for what it was. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know what your favorite Zelda games are, or what your list may be. I would love to know in the comments below. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like, even if you don't agree with this list. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be appreciated. But as always, I've been Zelda Master, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!